Hello and welcome to the March 2020 Sunshine Summit. My name is Heather and I am your host. This week, in association with Geeks Rising, we are bringing to you a week of live streams to recognize and celebrate connections. The connections that we make on our journeys have a huge impact on them. This event brings people together from around the world to recognize and celebrate existing connections, as well as an opportunity to help create new ones. And on the note of creating new connections, a theme of the summit that we have had throughout all of our events as Podbean, an amazing podcast hosting platform and a place where you can listen to podcasts. And today I'm really grateful to be joined by Shannon Martin from Podbean to join us to celebrate connections for the summit. Welcome to the summit, Shannon. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's wonderful to virtually connect.
Yay! We have some amazing guests in the past. This is our 5th live stream event. It is live. We're live at sunshinesummit.live or broadcasting with twitch.tv/sunpowerpod. We'd love for anyone to join us live, but you can catch the replays. And a lot of our previous guests have hosted. They are podcast hosts and they host their podcasts with Podbean. So you've popped up in our chats in the past with some of the guests and they've enjoyed hosting with you guys. And it's a real honor to have you here. I host Sunshine and Power Cuts with you and you've got some great features and I'm excited to share those with people today.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks for being part of the Podbean family. We do consider it a family, a large extended family all over the world. But we just really love being able to support creators and all the cool things they're doing. So yeah, glad to make these common connections.
That's awesome. A couple of our two main important connections that we kind of have in common are Adela Mizrachi, who is the founder of Podcast Brunch Club, and Stephanie Fuccio. And they've helped connect us. I think you were in the live streams that we've done in the past for the Sunshine Summit, possibly through Adela's connection when she was part of the summit. And Steph Fuccio may have connected us directly, which was awesome. And they both make wonderful connections and shine bright in all that they do.
Yes, they are great connectors, for sure. Yeah, I've been running the Shanghai chapter of the Podcast Brunch Club for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how long now. And I just love it. And I actually got to see Adela at PodFest in Florida not too long ago.
Cool.
And I chat regularly with Steph on WhatsApp. And so we used to live near each other, and now we're quite far apart. But,
Yeah.
we can all stay connected no matter what.
That's awesome. That's cool that you are able to stay connected with WhatsApp. She sends me little amazing notes on Instagram Messenger too, which is really neat wherever she is. So, yeah, those connections are important. And I just wanted to know, how did you get into the whole podcasting scene?
Well, basically, as a fan, I was a huge podcast listener from, I really think for me, it kind of started with NPR podcasts, because I listened to NPR on the radio a lot and then sort of figured out that they were doing podcasts somehow. And then back years ago, I listened to this podcast called The Amateur Traveler. He's still around. He's been doing the podcast forever. And I was actually on it once. And so just a big fan. And then I'm essentially a content writer is what I do for a living, marketing specialist, that kind of thing. But I do a lot of blogging and creating content for companies. And I really enjoy it because it's the marketing side it's more communications, it's more connections, community, and education. And I do work part-time for one other company. And then, I don't know, part-time is not enough to keep me occupied. And so I was doing that. I had kind of gone nomadic and I was looking for more to do and was doing some freelance work, but I happened across Podbean and they were looking for someone to help with expanding those kind of communications and marketing things. So that was about 6 years ago now, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just wonderful kind of happenstance that came, kind of into my life. And I was like, oh, podcasting, something I already enjoy. And so a lot of it to start with was sort of supporting the technical writers and, when we'd release new features and that kind of stuff. And then as a company, we've just continued to grow so much that now, we actually have more team members now that we've brought on to do more marketing and content. So I have working with some great colleagues now, and it's just really evolved over time. And, when I was first there, it was kind of behind the scenes writing, which it still is a lot. But then we just started going to conferences back then. And now we there's like a podcasting conference every month. Maybe they'll all be virtual from here on out for a while.
Yeah.
But but doing just a lot of cool things. And then just continuing to get more involved in the podcasting community with everything from conferences and speaking to doing the brunch club there, and just getting involved in all kinds of different aspects. So it's been really fun. I'm still kind of on the listener side because I don't run a podcast personally right now,
Yeah.
but I've been on a lot of them, and we do run one as a company.
Yeah.
So maybe one day I'll be doing one myself too.
That'd be awesome. We've got Stephanie in the chat. Hi, Steph. Welcome.
What's up?
Hey, Awaken, Mark and Tim, and Not So Busy are also there. Welcome, everybody. If anyone has any questions for Shannon as we go, do let us know. If you're watching the replay, leave them in the comments, and we'll surely get them to you. Just on that note, for future things, if people are watching the replay, you have an amazing community on Facebook, I believe, for Podbean. Would you like to tell everyone about that one?
Yeah, it's called Podcasting Smarter, and it's for Podbean podcasters, but also anyone that wants to become a podcaster or already is, no matter where they're hosted. And so we talk, we'll talk about Podbean features and stuff sometimes, but the main kind of goal of it is to support each other, to ask questions, get tips from fellow podcasters, and share information and that kind of thing. And it's a really friendly community. We've tried to really keep it that way. It's gotten a lot bigger. So we try to still keep it with a very friendly vibe, very open. So if you're brand new, you're not going to go in there and no one's going to insult you because you don't know everything about the latest technology. I think we have a lot of people that are just starting out, and then of course a lot with a lot of experience. So it's been really fun. Yeah, I love those groups.
Cool. That's awesome. It's great to have a place like that and to bring people together, and all of the things that you do. You're making connections all over the place. Like you, I'm a member of Podcast Brunch Club, and I host the Wellington chapter here in New Zealand. That's been an amazing community to be a part of. And it's cool that you're passionate about listening. I think there are amazing things that we can get out of podcasts, and people can listen to podcasts on Podbean. There's an app that you guys have which makes it easy to listen to podcasts. And this just recently, there's been a feature which is kind of going to probably be more useful now going forward, is the live stream feature, which can happen through there. And last year I got to experience that through She Podcast Live. I couldn't attend that conference in person because I'm here in New Zealand, but the live stream feature made that whole event accessible to me by the segments being live streamed through the Podbean app. So amazing feature, and I was wondering if you could share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, for sure. It's been really very exciting because we launched it in, I think it was about October, and it's just grown and grown tremendously. And it's an audio live streaming platform, really simple. And we developed it because, probably the obvious reasons, but because our podcasters would say to us, podcasting is wonderful, but you don't always get a chance to engage with your audience. I try to do things on social media, but it's sort of a lonely medium in some ways. And then I have listeners maybe that are interested in doing some interaction. I'm trying to figure out ways to do it. So that was really why we started it. We actually have a lot of people now using it that didn't have a podcast before, that are just starting with live streaming and either using that and turning it into a podcast, or just streaming, doing all kinds of things with it. So it's really cool. It's really simple. We run a webinar where we show how to use it, but a lot of people just start and they don't really need any help, any tutorials. You can actually run, as a person running it, you can run it from a browser or from the app.
Oh, cool.
And then people join with the app, and it's all free. And it's free, and it doesn't have to tie in with our podcast hosting. So if you host your podcast on one of our competitors, that's fine. You can use it free, and you actually get a copy of the audio file afterwards. So you can put it up as a podcast episode, wherever you host. But what we're seeing right now is, because people are practicing social distancing a little more, and just the world in general is getting more sophisticated virtually. People are really discovering a lot of different uses for it. Just in this past week, we've been doing a lot of outreach to churches, mosques, synagogues, religious fellowships, because a lot of people are looking at different ways to continue keeping that community going. And it's a really simple way, because also if you don't have a very sophisticated audio setup, I've done them before just with the earbuds from the phone, and had good sound quality and had interaction with people. And it's a lot of fun because listeners can call in.
Yeah.
If you have that enabled. I mean, we didn't
Yeah.
do the first few podcasts, for example,
Yeah.
but and then they can chat in the chat function and stuff. So it's really cool with the interaction.
I had that experience with Steph. Steph's amazing. She likes to try things out, and she tested out the Podbean Live feature, and she had it available so we could call in, and I got to talk to her like on a call. It was amazing and be part of it. And we took chat questions that were coming up as well. And I think we may or may not have had Adam Higgins from Odd Did Out come in as well. It's just really neat that that function's available. And like you were saying, podcasting can feel kind of lonely. And that way to build engagement in a way where you can do your podcast live or do some other things just through a live stream there. And it's really neat that you have it open, and it's not just for Podbean hosting people. That's very cool. I really like that.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, I did one a couple weeks ago, and I was the not the main host. I was the co-host, or sort of, and we did a little presentation actually about how to monetize your podcast. And it was fun because we didn't have anyone call in, but we had a lot of people chatting on the chat function, and we had a fairly small crowd joining us, but we had a high level of interaction. Almost everybody that was on there chatted some questions or some thoughts or something. And so I thought, wow, how valuable if you have 10 people, but they're all interacting. That's huge.
Yeah.
Because you can have hundreds of listeners and never hear from anybody sometimes. So a really cool interaction. And it has a lot of neat features. I think over time, more people are going to use more and more of it. We actually run every month. We're running a contest, so we kind of gamify it. We have a little engagement score that shows your number of listeners, how long people are listening, if they're sending comments, that kind of thing. And all of that comes into this score, and then we're giving away prizes every month and some nice gear. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've seen your top live streamers that you've sort of given a shout out to, people who are using it and you're highlighting them, which is awesome. You do a lot of other things, and Awaken in the chat said that sounds really cool. So it is cool, and I hope that you go check it out if you want to afterwards. But like, you also highlight podcasts that are hosted with Podbean. You have a podcast of the week, I think, segment, and you rotate through. I mean, you have lots of amazing podcasts hosted with Podbean, and so you've got probably a super long list of that, but you do get around to them, and I really appreciate, because Sunshine and Power Cuts was managed to be featured on that podcast of the week. But even more amazing than that was last year in August for the Sunshine Summit, Podbean ran a banner up the top of the Podbean app for the Sunshine Summit, and that was huge in helping make connections for the Sunshine Summit. So thank you very much for that.
Sure. Yeah, it's one of the nice things about probably, gosh, our app has been in existence for 5 years, maybe, or so. And we were probably, kind of cutting edge in a way in some of these things in the industry, where we were hosting, but then we, had a listening app, doing the live streaming. We're kind of always sort of on the forefront of the new innovation, which I love about our team. And when we did that, I think it was a little more unusual. Now it's not so unusual, but these are some of the reasons, because building that community on that app and those listeners, having that is something else that we can give our podcasters access to. We have some special things there for. So the features we do for our hosted podcasts, it's the podcast of the week, and then there's 2 other featured podcasts. And so we give them that opportunity, and that gives a nice boost because you're right in the main page of the app. And then the banners, we pick those editorially. And there also are some advertising opportunities, but we generally pick, hot topics that are going on. We actually run topics where you click on it and then it's a bunch of different podcasts, but then we also run individual banners for something, really new, exciting podcast that's coming out. And I get, emails from independent podcasts that are hosted with us. And then for that particular case, it's even some that are, from a lot of the big broadcasting companies, or any of the media companies that are putting out some, exciting new content. They'll kind of surface them to us. And if we think it's something that listeners would like, then it keeps the app fresh, for someone that's looking at it to find some cool new stuff. And discovering. I'm always looking to see what we're putting in there, what's going on. So, and we'll do topics like we have a thing up right now about some top gaming podcasts, because there's been a lot of gaming news and different things going on in the gaming world. And so we'll try to do a lot of those. If there's a big, like for International Women's Day, we did one. So any big holiday kind of things too.
That's awesome. Yeah. I also love the fact that in the app itself, you can like episodes that you've listened to and comment and leave a comment. So there's not only, if people aren't necessarily using the live feature, they can still leave a comment on an episode that they've listened to, and get a little bit of a feedback. Because some things don't have that feature, and it's like a little bit harder to get people to broach a little bit further, maybe send an email or reach out on social media and that. And it's just all in one app in one place. And yeah, it's been nice and to see that there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's handy because if I, as a listener, for me, that's kind of what I'll do. Like going back to write a review later, or I mean, I've been known to leave voicemails and do things like that.
Yeah.
But it really, you have to remember, and there's other steps, so there's a little friction there. So this is another way. And if someone's in the if they're not hosted with Podbean, but they're in the directory, it's a general listening app, they can claim their listing, so they make sure to get notified of those comments. So they can, so we have a lot of people that we run into at conferences and stuff that, some of the top podcasts, and they'll say, oh yeah, I see a lot of downloads from Podbean. And if they haven't already gotten hooked in with that, we'll get them, because they'll have 40 or 50 comments that maybe they've, never seen and been able to respond to. And so they'll go in and do that and can have some interaction.
Yeah. Tim in the chat said engagement is so important. Making it easy is such a great feature.
I'm a big believer in it. I did almost a 1.5 hour or 2 hour workshop at Podfest in Shanghai about community and engagement, and I could have gone on for half a day.
Yeah, that's cool. So on the note of Podfest Shanghai, there's lots of events that Podbean goes to and is a part of. What have been some of your highlights of those events?
Oh goodness, the highlight 100% is the interaction with the people,
yeah,
and the podcasters, and particularly the Podbean family members. We were just at Podfest. That is a wonderful event, Podfest in Florida,
mm-hmm.
and it was huge this year. I think there were 1,500-ish people there, and we just had so many Podbean customers coming up. We were able to actually give away some tickets to the event also. Yeah, to bring some people there. So that was really nice. And we do this little thing where if we were a little slammed at our booth. It was so busy, which was great. Yeah. But we have a little whiteboard where we usually do like their hashtag and hashtag Podbean family, and we take a picture together and post it on social media. And it's just so fun because, we talk a lot emailing and on social media, and then it's cool to actually, put the face and with the name and be there together and get feedback. And at Podfest, I kept asking, like, tell me any feedback, like good or bad, you can tell us anything. And fortunately, it was really good. We didn't really get a lot of negative feedback, but we always take, suggestions. That's one of the biggest reasons I think for going to those events. It's a lot easier to have the conversation and kind of get into the thought behind it. You get an email and sometimes like, oh, I don't know, you can get 100 emails a day, and it's a little hard to kind of get the feel for maybe what the person is saying behind it or that kind of thing. But when you kind of sit down and have a chat, it can be a really nice way to, see if we're heading in the right direction, or if there's any things we need to change, or what kind of things would help.
Yeah, definitely. It's amazing to see, like, put names to faces to names, and be there and be a part of it. And that's awesome that the booth was so busy. I like that, and I like sharing pictures together on social media. That's awesome. As you were saying earlier, there are like podcast events all the time, and is Podbean involved in International Podcast Day?
We've done some things with it in the past. Yeah, I think we've sponsored it before. We always sort of promote it and that kind of thing as well. So yeah, we're involved with a lot of different stuff, a lot of the different regional events. And again, maybe more of them right now will be virtual, and we'll still try to be involved if they're continuing to do stuff that way. The audio live streaming
Yeah.
is a great tool that we can offer. We did She Podcast, but we also at Podfest, that was part of the busyness factor, I think, is that we were running the booth and then we also were live streaming all the main sessions. So, and when we do that, we were kind of behind the main stage, making sure they were all going. And it was really fun because, again, a lot of people joined that way, and it enables people to hear the sessions. And then it's nice. It has a side benefit for the conference too, because a lot of those people that joined in Podfest, they were people, a lot of them didn't know about the event beforehand. And so they were asking a lot of questions like, where is this event? When's it going to be next time? So it also can boost the attendance for the following event as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think the more opportunities we have, the better. One of the things that I liked when I first looked at Podbean was how easy it was to get started, and you had great options for getting started. There are different hosts and different things, and you have to consider what works for you when you do it. But I just found for me it was easy to get started, and there was a option to see if I was going to like it. And then I went from there. I think there was like a 3-month trial thing at the time when I joined up, and then I was like, yeah, this is something I'm keen to carry on with. And here we are a couple of years later and going strong. Well, I'm still hosting with Podbean. My podcast needs to get off the ground again, but it's been stable and good, and I haven't had any issues. And if I did, I know that I would be able to, contact and get help and support or what have you. There's just it's been easy, and I know that Steph's changed a lot of things with her podcast and things, but she's managed to get those changes implemented. And just I think that I really appreciate what you guys do at Podbean and how easy it is and all the functions and features you have. I'm excited for the future because, the sky's the limit, I think, of what we could probably do with that. And I'm grateful that you're here today to share the connections that you've made on your journey.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think the thing about it being easy is what we're known for sort of overall, and then now sort of expanding into it being very sophisticated so that it can grow with people. So it's not, sometimes there's sort of a misunderstanding that we hear sometimes at conferences where they'll say like, oh, I started out with Podbean, it's been so easy, it's been great, but like, am I at a point where I need to move somewhere else? And we're like, oh my goodness, we have podcasts that have 1 million downloads an episode. You can be with us forever if you want. If there's something better, that's fine, of course. But there's not necessarily a reason to, unless there's something that you're lacking. And if there is, tell us.
Yeah.
But we do really try to make it simple. That's why a little while ago, I mean, we have the live streaming now, but we also launched quite a few years ago the ability to even just record a podcast using the app.
Yeah.
And just record and publish it. And that was something that didn't exist at that time. There's some other tools now available for it, but it was kind of a really new thing. And that was because we wanted, to take down some of those barriers. We offer a free plan to start that people can try. So that's another thing that's really, a good way for people to see and test it all out. And it's like, until you try it, it's hard to know if it's going to be the right one for you. And then, the interface is really easy, so that it looks just like everything else you kind of do online. It's not some rocket science kind of feeling thing. And our owners really, when they started the company, they kind of saw how that had worked for blogging. Mm-hmm. And that was something they wanted to bring to podcasting. So it's kind of the whole origin story of our company is in that simplicity. And for that reason, we also make the plans simple. So we don't do any kind of really complicated, you have to calculate out stuff kind of plans. All of the plans are unlimited bandwidth and storage. So it's not like X number of hours or X amount of space or anything like that. Because even if that could be just as affordable as what we had, it's more about the simplicity so that people aren't stressed out trying to figure that all out up front.
Yeah. Definitely. Steph said, Podbean is so easy to use, and I love that they are adding innovative services like the audio live feature. She also asked, can you give us a hint, Shannon, at some Podbean features coming up in the future, a sneak peek?
Ooh, a sneak peek. Let's see. Well, this year, a big part is going to be continuing to develop the live streaming and adding more to that. So because we're seeing such expanded use, there is a lot of feedback coming in, and so just making it little tweaks to make it better. So some of it's just iterations that you don't really notice, except that it's getting better. And then other things like I don't know if it's launched quite yet, but it will be out any day now. One of the things that I had heard from a number of people was that they wanted to have sort of like a test mode or a green room, so that, like you and I were chatting before we did our live stream today, that could be done, which it wasn't currently integrated into the platform. And so that is something we're adding to it currently. So it's going to be a lot of things with that.
Cool.
Yeah, and I think we'll be working on some other technical things, like some certification with some of our things with statistics. Those are kind of the live streaming is probably going to be a big thing for this next year. And then we also have in the maybe a little further out future plans, we have some thoughts about some of the monetization tools we have, and sort of maybe upgrading some things with that as well.
So if people don't know, on Podbean, they can have like a support program. There is a way that you can kind of like monetize your podcast, all in Podbean, so that all of the things can be available there. Not only can you listen and give it a like and leave a comment, but you can also support and financially support the podcast that you love on through Podbean.
Yeah, we kind of have every sort of form of monetization. We don't necessarily have like merchandise integrated per se, but that's pretty easy to do outside of us. But we have a couple different things with advertising that are available, and we have the program that you're mentioning is Patron, which is where if someone has people that want to support and donate to the podcast on a monthly basis, they can do that. And then it's all integrated, so it's really easy for that person, the podcaster, to then give like special bonus content to those patrons if they want. And it's just the same as publishing any other podcast episode. You don't have to have a different platform or upload it a couple different places or anything. So it's really straightforward, and we handle all the back end of it, all the processing and stuff. And then we also have the other piece, which I think, eventually we'll probably be sort of coming up with some different tools with, is we have a premium where you can sell content. And that's where you either sell like a bonus episode or you sell a subscription of some kind. And yeah, we have some people that are really successful with both of those. And so it's just also a matter of over time seeing if there's different things they might need, to make it a bit more sophisticated, or those kind of things. And we're always looking at the monetization. And the live streaming has some monetization built in for that reason as well. Cool. Because we're always thinking, okay, if there's a way that podcasters can potentially make some money, that's good.
Yeah, it's amazing what that can do, though. Like, people get very passionate about podcasting, and some people are incredibly generous. People who podcast, they are putting a lot of time and effort into what they do, and investing a lot into what they make. And then on the other side, the listeners are investing their time to listen, but then sometimes they also invest their money into supporting to help those creators keep making what they make, which is incredible. And having those features available all in one place is really cool. And live stream things are amazing. People get very passionate about what they're participating in, and like to support along that. We had that a lot this week. I'm very grateful to everyone who was part of the Sunshine Summit this week and supported by following or subscribing to my Twitch channel, or gifting subscriptions to other people, which was amazing, which is one of the ways that helps me keep doing things that I do. So yeah, I love that you have all of those accessible things at Podbean. It's very, very cool.
Yeah, we're just always kind of saying, listening, to what podcasters are looking for. And it is really cool with the Patreon. I read the comments on those sometimes. And when I've done some presentations where I'll clip some of those into the presentation, and it's just fun to see what people like. One of our podcasts that have done really well with that is called Rex Factor. It's about Scottish kings, and very niche sort of subject matter, but they have great patrons, and they all say pretty much the same thing. I've always felt guilty that I, didn't support you until now, or, I couldn't wait to support you and be part of the inner circle and this kind of thing. And I think it really it's an interesting thing because you think of it as a monetization thing, but I think it's also a community building tool in a way, because people, when they are technically bought in to your creation, they really feel, some ownership. So I think it has this sort of side benefit. You're making a little money, they're able to support you, and then they feel that really they have, a real part in that creation. So
Yeah,
it's kind of fun.
definitely. Yeah, we've got Crispy Tea Bag in the chat. Hi, Crispy. He's from the UK. Um, uh, what are some of the things that have helped you on your journey to make connections, and or that have helped you connect with podcasters or podcast, like, just along the way?
Yeah, I think that events have been kind of cool for us as a company, but I think that, of course, probably on a regular basis, social media has been huge. I mean, we're constantly connecting. It's really evolved over time. And I think particularly with podcasting, I find that Facebook groups are still something that's really useful, in particular with as far as social media goes, because there are a lot of podcasting specific ones. So I spend a lot of my time in podcasting Facebook groups, and it's fun because I'll be in there. This just happened last night. I saw, oh look, little notification, and one of our friends in podcasting had tagged me and said, I think Shannon can help you, with actually a question about live streaming. And it's nice because when you're in there and you're active, people know you're there as a resource. We don't go in and promote Podbean, randomly, but we're there when people have questions.
Yeah.
And there is a resource, and of course, also just watching and listening when we're not saying anything, because that's where we hear the chatter, not only the ones that contact us directly, but we hear like everyone's complaining about this particular thing that isn't working well in podcasting.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe it's something we can solve somehow. So it's really how you kind of keep your finger on the pulse of things. And then the normal kind of networking, mostly online kind of networking, but I have made great connections through our podcasters.
Cool.
And through people, just people generally in the community. It's the most welcoming community, I think, in the world. It's really just a kind-hearted community.
Yeah. There are a bunch of gems in podcasting. It's very interesting and amazing, and I'm really grateful for all the connections that I've made through it as well. We have Luke Who's Live, or Luke Who's Talking is his podcast that he hosts on Podbean, and he actually used the free version, I think, to get started, to test his toe in the water. And it's a great show that he shares stories about what he's up to in his life. So he's been going for a little while now, and he was a guest on one of my previous Sunshine Summits. So that's how the theme of Podbean pops up all the time, is that we've got a lot of people that I've connected with who also host with Podbean as well. And Liberty Dude is in the chat. He said, yeah, buddy. But yeah, that's really cool. People who are passionate about podcasting, I mean, podcasts open up all of these different topics and ideas that we can listen to, and just adding that element of engagement is huge, I think, bringing it kind of full circle so that it isn't sort of isolating. And then there are other things, like we are both part of Podcast Brunch Club, like we talked about earlier, which is meetups, and they have a virtual chapter. Have you popped by their virtual chapter?
I'm actually going to do the one that's coming up now that I've been kind of virtual for a while, and a lot of our members have been participating. So yeah, I'm really excited to check that out. I've absolutely adored. I cannot say enough things about Podcast Brunch Club. Adela is wonderful, and when I first heard about it, I thought, this is like, taken from my brain, like this. The thought, the problem, I guess, that I have, someone has solved.
Cool.
Because Adela says something about how, she was just constantly referring to podcasts, and her friends were kind of looking at her going, oh yeah, you heard it on a podcast, and my husband will tell you he hears that all the time. Of course. And so when I read that kind of synopsis of why she'd started it, wanting to have other people to chat with that loved podcasts, and wanting to, kind of dissect the things that she had listened to, I was like, I know this is for me. That's my place.
Yeah.
So it's been great. And we have had times where we have to break into a couple tables, and we have sometimes as many as 30 people in our meetings, and times where about 3 hours into it, we're still going strong talking. So the podcast can really bring people together that way.
Definitely. How long did you say you've been a part of Podcast Punch Club?
Maybe 4 years or so.
Nice.
Yeah. It's really interesting because I think the desire to get together and have meaningful discussions is what I really see as the kind of common theme. And in our chapter, especially, there have been a lot of people that came that actually didn't really listen to podcasts before. So it was cool because they kind of got brought into podcasting. So
Yeah.
I always love that. And then they also they love to discuss interesting topics. So it's a very vibrant community. And I think then they kind of go, oh, okay, this is a whole interesting media that maybe I didn't know about before. A lot of them were into YouTube videos, but not knowledgeable really about podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've had a couple in between meetings where we just chit chat about podcasts and kind of make recommendations to each other and talk general podcasting stuff, because a lot of the people were really interested in discovering more.
That's
So
amazing.
that was kind of fun too.
Yeah. Cool. 4 years. That's awesome. I've been a member for 2 years, and you've curated a playlist before, haven't you?
Yeah, we did one on immigration and migration.
Yeah.
So, which was appropriate since we were pretty much all immigrants or migrants, whether it was from somewhere else to China or within China or had migrated elsewhere from China and back. And so we could very much relate to the topic. And have you guys done
We
a list?
just did one for February
Oh, yeah,
2020. We did the nuclear power playlist.
that's right. Yeah, that was quite interesting.
Yeah. How did you find that experience of curating a themed playlist for Podcast Bunch Club?
We did it quite a while ago,
Yeah.
so maybe it's changed a little bit, but I know they're discussing some different things to do with it. But it was good. It was hard because there were a lot of episodes on our topic, and so I think we had a lot of quote unquote bonus content.
Yeah.
That I said, oh, here's more you can listen to, because it was really hard to narrow it down. It's such a huge topic, and we really tried hard to not make it. There was a lot. Of course, the U.S. is kind of the leader in podcasting, although it is changing. So a lot of them were U.S. based, which meant it was very U.S. centric in what it was talking about. And I wanted to not have it be just focused on immigration in the U.S. So that was kind of something that we were pretty deliberate about doing. We had one that was I think it was the China and Africa podcast. So it was actually about, that podcast often is about China being in Africa, like what the Chinese corporations and stuff are doing it on the continent of Africa. But this one was actually about African migrants in one of the southern cities in China. And so, just kind of all these different aspects of migration and immigration. And so it's pretty interesting. What about you?
Yeah, the topic of nuclear power was quite large. A lot of the podcast episodes were sort of around the US. We wanted to take a sort of a New Zealand element, but it was a little bit hard because ours was more on anti-nuclear testing rather than the generation of nuclear power. But I also had a lot of bonus content because there was like the whole Chernobyl series, and there was all sorts of other cool things that came out sort of like in 2019 and stuff. But it was hard. It's hard curating a playlist to narrow it down to a topic, but amazing to be a part of that experience because I appreciate that we have themed playlists to listen to. I loved getting together and being with people who I wouldn't have necessarily met in life. We got brought together because of Podcast Brunch Club, and we have incredible discussions on topics. And yeah, it's really amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me how sometimes the title, like nuclear power, was like, okay, well, I'm interested in it, but I'm going to be curious what the episodes are going to be like.
Yeah.
And then some of the episodes really surprised me. And then there've been other times when the topic it just wasn't my main area of interest or something, or it was something where I was like, oh, okay, maybe I feel like I actually knew quite a bit about it or something. And then sometimes those have been the best discussions. And we've even had people come to the meetings that are like, oh, I don't like this topic, blah, blah, blah. And then again, 3 hours later, everyone's still talking about it.
Yeah.
So it's always really, yeah, as I was listening to those episodes for that list, I was like, wow, this really surprised me how diverse the episodes are. And you find that a lot, I think. So it's really exciting.
Yeah. It takes a lot of effort, but it's worth it, I think.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
hats off to everyone. If anyone hasn't, go check out podcastbrunchclub.com. All of the information is over that way. We had some questions in the chat. Liberty Dude asked, is there anything in the works to create a discovery system for podcasts? We talked a little bit earlier. I'm not sure if Liberty was in the chat at the time, but on the Podbean app, you've got some great ways of discovering different things within the Podbean app itself.
Yeah, I mean, it is a challenge sometimes, discoverability. I think there's going to be a lot of things coming and changing with things out there, like Google really getting into the podcasting space. I think because Google is a champion at search. So I think that will enable more people that aren't necessarily as attuned to podcast apps to kind of end up finding podcasts just in searching. So
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a big thing. Within Podbean, yeah, we do a lot of different stuff. A lot of it is AI based, and as an app that kind of has to be your main thrust with it, because the AI can get smarter than us fast and recognize a lot of patterns that as humans we might not. So there's a lot of personalized suggestions in there, and sometimes it might even it might be very obvious, like, okay, everyone that listens to comedy podcasts maybe wants to listen to more comedy podcasts. But sometimes there's tie-ins that the machine will learn over time that, oh, you might not have logically thought that everyone that listens to Joe Rogan would listen to, I don't know, XYZ celebrity, or this other type of podcast. And so that's a big function of it. But then there's also the human curation element, where we look at the editorial banners, we make topics, and we're also very open to suggestions for those. So if someone has something they're really knowledgeable about, that's like a day celebrating it is coming up, or there's just a lot of news in a particular topic, we're always excited to bring those. So those are some different ways of bringing listeners different content. And search in podcast apps is a little more challenging because it's really, for the most part, just based on titles. It isn't quite as sophisticated at this point, but that is evolving too. So that will be something that continues to evolve. And really with search and recommendations and stuff, that's a lot of how it kind of works in podcasting, as opposed to someone sort of scrolling through a lot of content. And then we do, as part of those topics, we also do blog posts where we curate those kind of lists and make recommendations on things too. So yeah, there's a lot of different approaches going on. I think it's definitely in the process of evolving right now.
Yeah, that's cool. Thank you. He also asked a question, and he said, what server unity can be organized to ensure creators using the platforms maintain ownership of their uploads?
What was the first part of that? I didn't catch that.
Server unity. What server unity can be organized to ensure creators using platforms maintain ownership of their uploads? So I'm not sure if that's a very technical question for today, but if what you put on Podbean is owned by the person who uploads it to
Yeah,
Podbean.
I just am not 100% about that first term,
Yeah.
but for sure, and that is something wherever you put your content, wherever you host, to just check what their terms are.
Yeah.
And also to, but yeah, our content providers own all of their content. For example, we talked a lot about our monetization tools, but the way our platform works, those are all things that you decide to opt into if you want. You don't have to participate in any of them. So we're never, inserting ads without your permission or forcing you to be part of any of those things. So if you just like being totally independent, doing it the way you are, or doing those through other services that are out there, that's also completely fine. Yeah, and that is important, and that's always a discussion to look at and to ask your host also, if you move hosting companies, what's the process, and making sure that they give you the redirect that you have to put in to your feed so that you can just easily move. And all the hosting companies that have been around for a while do most of those basic things. So those are just important things to look at. But yeah, creators are the owners of all the stuff, and we don't, really take any creative control of anything.
That's awesome. Epic Film Guys, Nick is in the chat and he said, love Shannon so much, love Podbean.
Yeah, we love you too.
Podbean did an amazing thing supporting Livestream for the Cure, which is coming up in May of this year. It's an event that Nick and Justin from Epic Film Guys host each year. It's an event to raise money for the Cancer Research Institute, and you guys gave away hosting, I think, on Podbean as part of that. So that's incredible that you guys got behind that. A lot of podcasters get behind this event to raise money for the Cancer Research Institute. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it's a really cool thing, really amazing event. And I think we featured them similarly to what we were talking about with your podcast during the summit, because that's another thing that we can do if someone's doing something special to try to make sure it gets some attention. And if you're doing anything cool too, also feel free to at us on social media, and we're always glad to retweet and stuff. So we're Podbean calm everywhere.
Yeah.
So you can reach out and tell us if you're doing something cool, and we'll try to help get the word out.
Cool. Thank you. That's an amazing thing. But Nick agrees Podbean is simply amazing. So lots of happy customers in the chat today. Yeah. Is there anything that any advice that you would have for someone starting out in podcasting? We've talked about checking like terms of service and things, which is important wherever you go, but just advice getting starting on your podcasting journey.
Yeah, for me, I think a big part of it is really thinking of why you're doing it and not worrying as much sometimes about all the technical stuff, which can be the overwhelming part for. Some people love that aspect of it, so not for everybody, but for some people, that's the part that becomes a little overwhelming or keeps them from doing it. And really, especially nowadays, there is, of course, as over time, upgrading your gear, and there's a lot of things you can do to improve, but you can really start out in the most simplistic way and sound pretty good. It's just amazing if you think back to where we came with phones and everything, and what quality we get from stuff now. And just think about doing even video conferencing and stuff. It was so bad not very long ago. So it's not that hard to you don't have to make the tech simple, too complicated. But why are you doing it? Why? And there's not a right answer to that. It could be that, and we often have people that this is the case, that two friends want to chat every week.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, it's a good excuse to do that. And when they get some listeners, that kind of becomes fun and cool, but sometimes that's the reason. And if it's that connection between two people or three friends in a basement or whatever, that's great. And if it's about building some kind of community of like-minded people, that's wonderful. If it's about trying to make it a career, there's definitely a lot of people that go into it with a business mindset and a business plan in place. So just thinking about what, there are a lot of podcasts now. So what about it? It doesn't mean that yours has to be completely unique, but maybe what's the spin on it, or what's the reason that you're doing it, what you're bringing to people.
Yeah.
And kind of goes back to that spirit of connections, because the podcast is about somehow connecting, even if it's just connecting someone with information and education, or laughter, or whatever. I cannot tell you how many people over the years have told me, and I'm sure many of the podcasters joining us would have had this experience, where someone will say, there were times when you saved me when I was in a situation where I was so down, or, maybe not that dramatic, but maybe just, you don't know what your podcast has meant to me, even though it's the first time I'm telling you.
Yeah.
And that ranges from just a really silly, goofy podcast that just makes someone smile when they really need it, to a meditation calming podcast that someone really relies on every day. To discussions about mental health. And there's just so many examples out there. And we're seeing really cool stuff happening with podcasting with companies too, with doing a lot of their communications internally. And that's also like a really cool and new space for us. So I think just seeing like these different uses where people can connect, like connecting with other employees and connecting in company culture and this kind of stuff. It's something I, wouldn't have thought of when I first got into podcasting. And I love that it's, letting people do stuff in a new and different way.
Yeah. Knowing why you're doing it is really important because, like, that passion and drive that sort of gets you to start in the first place is kind of the thing that will help drive you forward or keep you going. And yeah, if it's about connection. When you create something, you're connecting with it, whether that be, like you said, with the friend that you want to catch up with, or the information you want to share, or you want to explore the topic for yourself. And people connect with that as well. And sometimes you don't know the ripple effect of that podcast, of this incredible thing that goes out into the world, and who knows who will find it. And I just love that it can be experienced by people all over the world at any time that they want to listen. They're available whenever, wherever. And you can hit pause and come back, it's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, you see that in your download charts sometimes about different countries and things. And sometimes podcasters will say to me, I don't understand why I would have a listener in so and so place. And I'll say, well, because it's the internet. So
Yeah.
they people find it anywhere. And but we're really noticing that in the live streams because you'll see and people will say stuff like, oh, I'm joining from so and so place. And then because it's live in the moment, it's really people feel that very directly, like, oh, this is so cool, I'm talking to someone across the world. And some interesting conversations. I see the potential for that to really bridge differences. We had one where it was a sort of very political, could have been sort of acrimonious kind of conversation, and someone called in from the country they were talking about, and it's like, ooh, look at this. Wow. Look what can happen. Yeah.
That's incredible. I love that it opens up those opportunities. That's amazing. To hear from people who are in those places, or to share their thoughts. That's incredible. And like we said earlier, it's open and available to everyone to participate in. You don't necessarily have to host with Podbean to be able to access that, and you get access to the audio files afterwards, so you can save them and keep them for later, or use them, or make them a podcast episode that they are on your feed for later.
Definitely, yeah, and it's it also, those are also listed in the Podbean app. Like they're listed. You see them kind of right in the front, the top couple, and then there's a list of all the ones that are kind of scheduled in the next little bit. And so there's automatic promotion that goes on to the Podbean listener community. And I found, like, the one I did, I think half of the people probably that joined it were people that just randomly found it when it was happening, or saw it when it was scheduled, and not the people that we had promoted it to in social media. So I was pleasantly surprised, and that seemed to be the case at Podfest this time too. There definitely were people that were maybe that host with us, and so they have the app, and then so they were interested in podcasting. But yeah, kind of nice that random people might discover you that way too.
Yeah, definitely. And like we said, that engagement, because some previously podcasting could feel a little bit isolating. You record it here, and then eventually it gets there, and you might interact with people who listen or not. Some people may have felt a little bit alone, but yeah, just opening up those opportunities. Plus, we also mentioned the commenting feature that you have, and being able to share, and then being able to support the shows that you love on Podbean.
Yeah, we were surprised when we were live streaming from Podfest. We got a couple gifts because they have, they can buy you a cup of coffee or give you flowers and different things in there. We were like, oh my goodness, we're getting gifts. Okay. So they do have that feature in there. And I think that's going to grow more because I think as people have gotten more comfortable with live streaming and some of these cool little things that are in it, that'll be something that people will do. It's fun. It's very gamified, and people, gamifying does really work. So
it does.
I think that will be neat to see what happens with that over time.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, that's part of the experience. Gamifying it helps add a different element to it, and engagement and making those connections. So that's awesome. Just while everyone is here, we've got some links here on the screen. On Twitter, you can find Podbean at podbean.com. And Instagram, you are Podbean, I noticed. And Facebook is Podbean.com, but your website is podbean.com. So fairly simple. Most of them are the same to kind of catch up with you guys and check out the features that are offered. There's a free plan to get started. Thank you for being an amazing host that I've enjoyed hosting with for the last couple of years. I'm going to carry on doing that. I've made a lot of connections with people who podcast and they host with you guys as well. A lot of them have been on the Sunshine Summit in the past. We've had 5 events now, and just I love the features that you've got going, and it's cool that we've got similar connections and connected with other people who are awesome and shining bright, doing amazing things as well.
Yeah, that's why we're here. I mean, that's what it's all about. We're here for you guys. I mean, we're nothing without our podcasters, right? So it's really great, and we love hearing about what people are doing. And I'm so lucky because every day people email us and sometimes requesting to be featured, and then they tell me what their podcast is, and so I get to hear all these cool and different things that people are doing, and it's always all these years in it, I'm always surprised by something new that comes out. So and with the ever expanding field in podcasting, I think we'll just see more creativity, more diversity. We're seeing more countries getting more into podcasting and stuff, so that's really been a lot of fun.
That's cool. There's a lot of love in the chat from Nick and Steph for you, and Awaken said well played, and it also said that it was cool earlier. So thank you very much for sharing all about your journey through podcasting and making connections, and through Podcast Brunch Club and Podbean. Shannon, amazing to have you here. Awesome to talk to you and meet you virtually in person.
Yeah, way across the world from each other, but this is what the power of the internet, right?
Exactly. Thanks. Awaken's a great show. Thank you so much to everyone who was in our live chat. Thank you, Shannon. We've got some special thanks here to do before we go. Our stars today, thanks for supporting the stream. We've got our moderators, Nick from Epic Film Guys, Luke who's live, and thank you to everyone. Awaken who was in the chat, Can't Stand Up Comedy, Rags, Steph Fuccio, Mark, and Liberty Dude, Crispy Teabag, Not So Busy. Thank you everyone for coming by. For anyone who catches the replays, they are available. And like I always like to say, this is our finale stream for today. That's the end of the March Sunshine Summit for 2020. Join us again in August of 2020 for the next one. Until next time, be empowered by nature.